Um, so, what I want to do is talk about a few things coming up, some cool opportunities and things. We'll look at Blue Monk 2 a little bit and Tenor Madness, see if there's any questions with those. But I've noticed in private lessons and questions that have come through here a few little things that we can look at. And I want to tell you, I'm super excited as that's the thing people say nowadays, super excited. It's not excited as if me being excited is important enough. Um, and if you're not muted, whoever is not, that would be awesome if you could be muted. Um, all right, sounds like someone's tapping on the microphone there. Um, there it is. I got it. Okay. Um, there is a chance to play jazz in person in January, and doing a wild idea I had of taking the biggest selling jazz album of all time, Kind of Blue by Miles Davis, and turning it into a uke ensemble. And this will be January 19th, 20th, and 21st here in Austin. In my studios here, I'll, for the most part, have Miles Davis's parts. We're not going to do every note on. There's no way we could do that in 3 days. But in many of the songs, I'll have Coltrane, Miles, and Cannonball Adderley's parts, along with bass and drums, and we'll study the chords that were mostly played by Bill Evans. And that's early bird price is $200 for 3 days of a deep dive into jazz. And that's modal jazz, which would be a whole different thing. But cool opportunity. Another, we had, I think if I feel like I'm astral traveling lately, but maybe it was last week. It was very recently. Had some people in this very room playing jazz from this very class, and that was a lot of fun digging into Blue Monk. And for those that could make it again, December 9th strikes me as the day that is. Saturday at 3 o'clock. Now, if you're living in Portland, Oregon, that's a long commute. But if you're in Austin or somewhere nearby, might be worth considering. And lastly, still got the early bird price on the Blues Club, which for those really interested in improvising, that's a great thing. Or if you just like blues, it's an awesome thing. So, thrown all that out there, I want to get into Blue Monk for a minute and see what might have come up in the room here. If anybody had, and I'm always open to breakthroughs and breakdowns, either anybody have either of those with the Blue Monk 2, with kind of the double note version of that. And it's a safe space for either one, for sharing your joys or your um, sadness here. No, not one question. Okay. Then I have a question for you. Did anybody notice anything unusual in the chords on this song? Or interesting or kind of different than we've had? Hmm.
Yes, for me.
Tell me more, Daryl.
Well, it's not anything dramatic, but it's just the practice of that uh, not so much the chord fingering. That's always a bit of a problem. But it's the you've got to hit one clean note. That eighth note's got to be hit clean, and it's like pick that up. For me,
Mm.
that's for me that's not that and that's not something that I've typically had to do in rhythm and blues in chords. They keep
Right.
ringing, right? But
Right.
here you got to get that eighth note clean. It's got to be picked up on that second beat, and then that right that's hard for me.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And so that aspect of it, inserting some space into the measure, allows for a momentum to happen and kind of this expansion and contraction rather than just this constant ringing. And this rhythm, one and, is such a great one to have. And it's not easy. It's a thing that I think over time you will develop more of an ear for. And even when go to a more or less typical ukulele strum along, you might be like, oh, what's it? And finding that space is so important, and it takes effort to get that. Well, I want to, yeah, and then these chords are so rich, and want to make sure I'll just kind of like that 13 and the 9, and they are pretty much always available options, numeric options for substitutions of a 7 chord and of the major chords. And it's just kind of a, do I like that or do I like that? And even sometimes we find it's just a C chord. It's just the basic chord. But these different colors can really add a lot. Well, I want to get to the hidden Easter egg here. And there's a little thing that happens here at the end. And, you've got these, kind of rude chords. And this, that's kind of cool. That G13, G9. But right here, we have got our first experience with two tritone substitutions. Now, if you've done some jazz, you've heard of these. And if this is new to you, it's a really interesting idea. So the normal chords here could be C, A7, D7, G7. And we're going to keep, and this is a really typical turnaround of a certain style. I remember seeing Mose Allison, electric piano player, live, and I heard this like at least 6 times in his 2-hour show or whatever. But the sound, super cool. We've got the 1. This is what's called a tritone substitution of the 6 chord. 2, tritone substitution of the 5 chord. What is a tritone substitution, you might ask? It is substituting the chord that we're going for, in this case like an A7. We look at what the 5 of that chord is and we flat it. So the 5, and this is very good just getting our chordal knowledge and our theoretical knowledge. The 5 of A is E. So we change the A to an E flat. And since we're using this color, this 13th, that's just a minor third higher. So from the 1, instead of this sound, we've got, and then That happens to be a half step above our 2, which is a D. And then we're going to do a tritone substitution of the G7, which would be a D flat. And so it gives us this really cool chromatic walk down of C, E flat, D, D flat. And it makes it not sound so typical in that way. I just wanted to throw that out and give you a chance to digest that a little bit. We can look at it in greater detail down the road. Also, could have just skipped the E flat, but it just sounds so cool. Two hits there on the C13 at the end. But I like that. Now, if we were playing something a little bluesier, we might say, well, let's use 7th chords. Probably want to use the same color of chord, same number. 7s or 9s. Whatever it is, that movement of going up a minor third and coming down is really easy on the hands, and it sounds really cool, but it's possible to even not realize the complexity of the harmony of that and how cool it is, and how over time in the next 9 months or so we'll be revisiting this concept regularly. Any questions with that, Val? Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand why you would do a tritone substitution of A7, why there'd be an A7 there. The C13, it goes C13 and E flat 13, and that's
Yeah.
tritone makes it, instead of an E13, it's an E flat 13.
Not exactly. Okay, yeah. So let me do a little screen share. Yeah. How do I screen share? Where is it? There it is. Hello. Okay. Um, okay. Are you with me? Did I do this right? No, not yet. Okay, here we go. Are you seeing that?
Hmm.
Okay. It's showing up differently than it ever has on my screen for some reason. So the area that we're talking about is right here, Val. The E, so the typical ending would be 1-6-2-5, which would be C, A7, it could be A13, what, and C, A, D, G. We look at where that A chord would be, whatever kind of chord it is. The 5 of A is E. We substitute that with an E flat chord of some sort. And then the D flat is the flat 5 of the G7 there. But we're using 13s for all these. Does that make more sense?
Yes, because I was thinking about a 1625, but I didn't think hard enough about it. But that makes total sense now.
Well,
Yeah.
there's so much to think about, and the beauty of this is that um, people already have thought about it. It's available out there. Yeah, cool. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? And
Yeah. Can we think of it as a, so I know that tritone substitution means flat 5 substitution. So can we think of it as shape? Like, okay, if you play this shape, then you got a tritone substitution already. It's like, is the one, then this, Like, can we think of,
one more time, Grace.
okay. All right. So the tritone substitution, now we know that it's flat 5. So tritone means flat 5, just substitute it for flat 5. Can we think of it as also like a shape, like this is,
Yeah, in this case, I kept them all in the 13 shape. It was
or it could have
convenient.
been variated, like flat
Yeah.
11, flat 5,
And
11.
in
Okay.
this, I don't want to get too carried. I wanted you to spend a month playing it before you knew what it was, because it's so easy to get caught in the mind of it, but it's so much more important to get it in your fingers and in your ears. There's so many things we can do with this, and many options of it. It's also a thing I know. John here in the group somewhere, it's the kind of thing a bass player might throw in that note, instead of the chord player or in addition to. It's just a possibility to make it more interesting and kind of keep it moving. Yeah. Um, the we'll get more experience with it, but that's the idea of it. Um, any other questions with
So
that?
Kevin, I always
Yeah,
think of that as kind of for when I'm playing bass, it's a chromatic walk down back to the one is
yeah.
how I always looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite the same when you're doing a full shape of chords all the way down, but it's same idea.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of chromaticism with it. It's a funny thing. A lot of times, if I try to explain the tritone substitution and then showed it to you and then put it in the song, I think it would have been very confusing. But to already do it and go, oh, it's that, it's yeah, it's a simple thing, and it oftentimes ends up in a half step movement. But there is a lot of theory and application behind that. Any other tritone substitution Blue Monk questions? Okay. Well, awesome. I want to get into the and maybe on our open mic time, I'll dive into the to Blue Monk a little bit myself. Um, Tenor Madness. Please tell me somebody had trouble with that turnaround. Yeah, yeah, it's a little bit tricky there. Um, I want to walk through just a couple of little observations I noticed in working with folks with this, and just reiterate a couple, like the finger logic of it. First thing, I'm playing this really a B flat 6 triad. This is G, B flat, D there. Or if you're a numbers person, 5, 6, 7 frets with my first, second, and third finger. Um, Idea number one that will really help you is don't move this finger the entire time. Especially here. Want to preserve this little space here where we're just reaching once to that fourth fret, that flat note, that D flat. Um, but if I'm going, chances are at some point I'm gonna not know where I am. this becomes an anchor, and that turn, this it's just like, to me, this is like found money, moving one finger. So we have the shape for the 1 chord, shape for the 4 chord, back to the 1, shape for the 4 chord, and we can just think of 3 chord blues, even though there could be substitutions over it. And then here's our shape for the 5 chord. And I want to show you a cool thing here. And the reason the thumb is very effective back here, if it's up here, it gets really hard to change shapes without bending the wrist. If I keep this here, it's going to shorten this distance here, which over time will have more of this shape than this shape, but the point here, when I'm playing that C, G, C, I am going to pivot and physically bring that C to the B. And then bring it back to that E flat. And that is, I think, a lot easier than if I go. I'm really kind of chasing things. And so it may be a new concept to you. Don't be afraid to elbow your neighbor. Oh, we're not even in the same space. You don't have to worry about it. I find there's a musicality to the movement. Then da 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 da, that really gives me this kind of swing with the pivoting of that. Tricky part, I think, is really that it's second string, third string, second, third, fourth, second, third, second, is all the string switching. And by keeping this one finger here helps us with that. So that's my 2 cents with this tune. And let's just play along. Let's make some racket here. This is at 100. That it shouldn't hopefully be over anybody's speed limit. And here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Now, if this is too much, just play that one phrase. And preserve the integrity of the whole tune. And here comes the 1 chord. I might even sing the... Now I might just try playing the 4 chord. Verses, I'll model like a way that can really make the musicality, the part of this more difficult would be if I did this. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I just start and stop and don't, I want to let this run and get the flow. And if I can just play 3 notes, I could even take this and just say I'm going to play the D on the 1 chord, D flat on the 4 chord, C, C on the 5 chord. And I'll just add notes. And so these phrases are just so energetic that I want to join them, not force them into me. I want to join and add notes to it until it's fluid, and it'll be more musical, playing fewer notes and adding if you're having trouble with it. These chords are also really fun, and it's very similar to a style called jump blues, where it's an anticipated chord before where the 1 would be. It's easy enough to do, but it's just so it's accenting. It's like a chord stab with the musical phrase. I'll show you what I mean. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, and just letting that line. And if I were soloing, I'll show you some cool stuff. There's that tritone substitution that could go in there. Down the road, if we wanted to take this a little further, I'll take out this melody for a second and show you some cool possibilities. I could start to kind of put together chords and notes, or just play some rhythms. All of those notes fit. And it would give the illusion of having chords and soloing. It can be just kind of a fun experiment. And sometimes those notes that are just right there in the chord sound better than you would expect. Any questions about tenor madness? No. It's a questionless. I guess we need to. Next week we'll do giant steps. See if anybody has any questions. And well, awesome. Well, I'm glad this is working. I would like to later on today show some ways to kind of fuse this stuff together. And let me kind of come back to the room. Take a moment. Let me just take stock here for a second and see how many folks would say they have, to some degree of success, played Blue Monk. All right, all right, all right. How about the same question, tenor madness? Okay.
And from Blue Monk to the chords, it's very difficult. I can't change on time yet, but the melody and everything else is fine. But
Okay.
just the difficult chords.
Yeah, and that's the thing with jazz to me is that if Wagon Wheel had difficult chords, I would never learn them because I don't want to play that song. It doesn't speak to me. But the harmony itself of this music is so rich. And these 4-note chords, to me, the reward is getting them to sound good. But it takes a lot of work. And I've kind of, I went back and forth between taking it easy on you guys and doing, but it's just when you can do that, and getting used to using 4 strings, and very, very limited use of open string or very carefully chosen open strings. But yeah, so on Blue Monk, Grace, just for my edification, what are the hardest parts for you of the chords? Yeah,
But
you
Blue Monk too, they
yeah.
are,
Is
yeah.
the
eh,
is the whole thing just hard, or are there particular changes there?
Trying to look at the oh, hold on.
That's all right. I'm asking because I think that it's probably hard for others too. This one is pretty. Yeah,
I had trouble with the G13. I think that's the one you were.
yeah,
That's
yeah. I find getting the that first finger, have the second finger play 2 notes, um, versus all 4 fingers coming from that bar.
Kevin,
It,
we've seen this before where I think you recommended for the D minor 7 to use all 4 fingers and then just slide 1 up and 1 down.
yeah,
And then the 9 is just
yeah,
the right, yeah.
yeah.
So using
That's
one finger.
another option. Once these tunes start getting at a higher tempo, It changes. And always, this is a great little possibility. You could practice fingering the whole chord, but only play like the bottom two strings. And you'll notice like already, oh wow, that's just a half step. Sometimes that can help.
Kevin,
Yeah, go
okay,
ahead, Doug.
go back to that again, if you don't mind. On
Yeah,
the going from going from that D minor seven to that G13 to the G9. What fingers do you use there? Right, coming to bringing that down to there. What fingers do you use for that?
yeah. It depends on the tempo, and so without sounding like I'm running for office here. Um,
Well,
I'll
show me two ways. Show me the
Yeah, no,
slow and the fast.
and there may be more than maybe beyond the two party system here. But the um, I just want to I would say what would dictate it would be the tempo and just where my flow is. And sometimes my hands do things I did not intend them to do at all. And then you just kind of go with it. And a lot of times it can be from fatigue and just needing to change and everything. And so, but let me just play the whole thing, and then we'll zero in on that. Um, and so I play it this way, usually only after, a lot of experience of being able to get those four to ring and then getting used to that string digging right into the joint there. If I weren't into that, I might take it. And that's a really super clean way there. And so another way, but even a third way, let's see if I can take it from the four chord here. Whoops, in the same key, huh? Sounds so weird. Where am I? So that's what Lisa was talking about. This possibility of playing four fingers. I'm a big proponent of playing this 13 with my first, second, and pinky there for some reason. That feels more balanced than the third finger, and I have a harder time. I can get more torque somehow back here, but yeah, and all of these chords are gonna take some time to get them musical.
I
Yeah,
think my
Grace.
my problem is not the chord shape. I think it's the memorization.
Ah,
Like
okay.
it's kind of like its own thing
Yeah.
because it's like the chord have its own music and the melody has its own music.
Hmm.
It's not like the G G G G G C C C C C and then somebody sing over on top of that. It's like different two animals living together.
Yeah, definitely. And it's gonna take some time. And so I'll model. I'm gonna play along with this just so I can, if I don't make all the chords. Sometimes talking and thinking, talking, and playing are kind of tricky to do. I want to go through, and this would be true of everything we do. But one way of thinking about this is just to reduce this to a 1-4-5 and know where we're at. And so if I'm playing this, regardless of the chords, there's a 1, there's the 4, there's a 1. There's just little movement there. 4 substitutes for the 4. 1. Still the 1, really. 5. 1, 6, 2, 5. So I want to know. There's the 4. And we're just kind of adding these 2 5 1s. It's more important than C13, F9, C13, G minor 7, C7, F9, A diminished 7, C diminished 7, C13, E minor 7, A7, D minor 7, G13, G9, C13, E flat 13, D13. That's hard to say that and play them in time. But the numbers are much more important. And it would be the same thing if we're doing tenor madness. 1, 2, 2, 4, 1, 4, 4, 1, 5, 1, 5. And just knowing where you're at in that story, I think is more important. And it takes a lot of practice. But I think that there will come a time, and I'm on the fence here, how long we stay with blues, because I think the more comfortable you are with all of these aspects, the more everything will make sense. Awesome. Well, in my typical fashion, that went over about 25 minutes longer than I thought I would on this.
Kevin,
Yeah.
so you're just saying that we should know whether it's a 1-4-5 chord, or we should be focusing on that.
Yeah. And so starting with, I could play, da 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 da, C7, da 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 da, da 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 da, da da da, 4 da da da, da da da. That's the song. Three chords, really. And then we start to group the twos and the 2 5 1 within that. But it's organizationally, there's only 3 parts to the story. I think a big problem with people that know a lot of theory and practice a lot of scales and have a lot of chops, they don't know how to tell a story. They don't even know the story, the form of the story they're telling. And that is, to me, much more important, and is essential. And I hear it over and over again. Great musicians telling all kinds of stories over this, but you don't have to be able to play those 30-second note Coltrane flourishes to tell a story over this. But you do need to know when you're playing over the 1 chord and the 4 chord and the 5 chord. And that's where the blues are so embedded in this. And it's such a beautiful way. And we're, like we talked about, instead of, playing just blues, we're like doing what is it, tonicizing the next chord. That is taking us there. And it's just so inventive, all of the harmonic movement within the story. But it's like, I mean, it is storytelling. It's like you're telling a story and then you forgot the story, or you're lost in your own story. And so if there were one thing to get, it's where the 1 is, the 4 is, and the 5. Yeah. And that will never stop. Except the thing that will change is that then we're going to be going to 1, 6, 2, 5 instead of 1. And we're going to be, expanding all of these chords, but we want to know where we are in that arc. Another, aspect of this is the triptych of story, which I would call beginning, middle, and end. Once upon a time, that's your 1 chord. This, some elfish woman was, eating her porridge. That's the 4 chord. And then she went into the dark forest. That's the 5 chord. And it's not like you only tell the story. It just keeps cycling around. And I'd imagine if you had like a literature or a film degree, you can't watch a movie or read a book and go, oh, this, yep, yep. Oh, we're going this way now. Oh, now we're over here. But we're pretty much at one of those 3 points. They feel different to me. And so that's like the 1 has that is setting. There's the 4. Doesn't matter what key we're in. Doesn't matter what colors are added to that chord. It can make it have a different, see between magical realism and cognitive dissonance. But we want to know the bottom line, and that's it. Well, speaking of blues, I want to take you on a little journey with one of the most recorded songs. I don't know, I've seen different things, but like one of the top 5 most played jazz tunes is Straight No Chaser by Thelonious Monk. And this one is, much like Sonny Rollins with Tenor Madness, it has its little weirdness to it, and like Blue Monk did, this one is so insidious in that it's so simple. And again, we see how Thelonious Monk is really a genius at coming up with a line that really a child could come up with, and then just moving it around and turning it upside down a little bit, altering it, and it's so memorable. And so a couple of things I want to mention before we dive into this. One, I finally got to play some music with like a real pro musician guy that lives here, and playing a bunch of jazz. And my idea for this class has been just learn a bunch of tunes. And I swear, in one solo, he quoted Blue Monk, Straight No Chaser, and a Duke Ellington song. And it's like, and he went to Berkeley. So it's like, it sounded great. these geniuses have already turned it into music. And so I feel like this idea of, well, let me practice scales and then I'll turn it into music maybe eventually. It's like, no, let's just learn. I really think there's a number of tunes that you can learn. And once you hit your number, it becomes real fluid, kind of go back and forth. That was thing one. Thing number two that was really, really interesting to me, and this guy mentioned this, that he's a huge Thelonious Monk and Charlie Christian fan, and said that Charlie Christian was a big ukulele guy. And if you don't know Charlie Christian, you will. We'll get into his music. Born in Texas, grew up in Oklahoma, played all around that area between there. But he was the first rock star of the electric guitar in the 30s, and had no template. Or if he did, there was one other guy from San Marcos, Eddie Durham, who had recorded electric guitar before him. But that was all he had to go on. His tone, his playing, his whole thing is phenomenal, and maybe, the most copied soloist of jazz. Tremendous musician. But Thelonious Monk apparently spent a good deal of time creating his template for his music. And during that time, he was spending a lot of time with Charlie Christian and hearing all this ukulele, and it became part of what Thelonious did. And so I find it makes total sense to me that Thelonious Monk probably spent 10 years going, I want to create something here. What are the pieces? What are the elements? How does it work? I'm going to create my own language. And yeah, it feels really, spiritually rewarding to bring it back full circle and look at this on the ukulele. So without further ado, I'm just going to play you this tune, and we'll talk about it here in a minute. This is at 110.
Little
I'll
question.
see if this is too fun. Yeah.
You know so much about what the jazz players say and do. How do you know? Like, you read books or you watch YouTube, or what did you do to have so much knowledge of jazz?
I've had the pleasure of living almost 60 years. And and I'm like, I have one of those brains that remembers every detail except the ones that are really important. I've been studying jazz for 25 years, maybe. And just all these little tidbits. I'm always finding new things. All right, so let me put this tune on here. And the internet is a tremendous source, and Ken Burns' jazz documentary, if you've got however many hours that is a great start. But here's Straight No Chaser. This tune, I hope I don't mess it up. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. He loved those octaves. And we're in F. phrasing. And so this cool little line, maybe I'll do a screen share here. It's really not incredibly hard. There's no shifting or anything. But I want to just look at this for a second. Um, and it was really heartening to me to realize that he deliberately set out to create his own musical language, and not borrow that much from other people, and put a lot of thought into this. So let me take it up to 200%. I want to just study the cadence of this. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 3 and 4. Just the rhythm alone, there's so much info there. And if I just played along with this, I don't know if I can do this, but I'll try to count it at 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And 1 and 2 and I can't. And feeling that that is 1, 4, 1, 1. And that's the main phrase. And then it goes to the 4 chord, and he uses that phrase over the 4 chord there. He used that phrase, but at a different place in the beat, in the bar, for the 4 chord there. And starting to make these discoveries, it can lead to creating your own language with it. But to me, the important part on these 2 bars is here. All of the space. And learning to leave some space, and realizing a lot of this is, the church music of the time, a lot of call and response, and blues has a lot of that. And then we're back to our F phrase, and then same thing. And this is what I was talking about for the 1 chord. These 2 are really kind of under the 1 chord. But there's our 5, that 2 to the 5, but and starting to notice where these lines are. And then we have this new riff that's the really long riff here. And this will be really, a nice challenge for folks. 2, 3, 4, 1. That's a lot of notes, but it's a lot of F notes. A lot of the same notes, G's, A flat in there. And just getting how these go. And so talking about what I was doing earlier, just knowing the 1s, 4s, and 5s. 1, 4, 1, 1, 4, and no substitutes on this 1 until here. 5, 1, 6, 2, 5. And just kind of knowing how that story works, I think, can show you how these lines fit in here. Now, at first, it may take take some work, and it may be a thing where, you know, that tempo might not be where you want to start. And I'll show you a couple of little things with that. I'll just play it a few times. And this is knocking it down 20 beats to 90. And I'll show you a couple of different, using thumb or like a more classical style, and both are good. 1, 2, 3. Here's the thumb. And that's staccato. And here's fingers. And so it just, you know, let you figure out what works best for you. The more muted, darker sound of the thumb is chosen by most, but if it's more percussive or faster, sometimes the fingers are cool. Yeah, is that Grace? Yeah.
When it's 1625, can we water it down to 1.5? 1625 is actually 1.5, right?
Right.
Or
yeah.
it should be
And
thought of
so,
1.6.
yeah. And just put that on the screen for a second. So, yeah, the 1, 6, 2, 5, F, D, G minor, C. Could be, if it were a blues song, it would just be those two. And there can be, it could just be the 2-5 at the end. All kinds of possibilities. I spent a crazy amount of time having a debate with myself over which versions of these songs to give you. But yeah, that's the story of the 1625. Is the one and the 5. The 6 and 2 are just connecting it and making it more jazz. I was gonna, at some point, I was gonna say this, so I'll say it now, because it's in my brain and it'll be gone in seconds. Yeah, I spend a lot of time researching and looking, and then finally listening. I used to kind of trust a lot of jazz authorities as I was putting this stuff together, and then I would listen to the record and go, huh, that's really, this is what, there's a thing called the Real Book, which has, everything, all the harmonies to everything in jazz. So you're supposed to know the melodies. So if you're a horn player, you could go to a gig and give this to a piano player or a bass player and go, hey, we're going to do the gig now. Here's the chords. Except that those chords were created in the 70s, 80s, and 90s with harmonic concepts from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, playing music from the 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s, maybe, using harmonic concepts from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And it doesn't always work correctly. And I'm, if you don't know this, I'm proud to admit I'm very much a purist in a lot of ways. And so when I hear Miles Davis's version of something, I don't feel like I need like somebody with a PhD in jazz's take on what would have been better, or what else they could have done with this. I'm more inclined to trust, a classicist approach and be like, this is what it was. I want to get to what as close to it actually is. And sometimes with the ukulele, it's a little tricky because the chords are so much bigger on guitar and certainly on piano. But I wanted to just kind of throw this out there that, I'll do my best to honor the music and the song more than the concepts or the harmonies, because I think there's more information there. And I keep finding more and more just harmonic clashes with the melody. And I think a lot of times people think, oh, this set of chords would be more interesting to solo over, but it doesn't sound good with the melody of the tune. And since that's what we're doing mostly, I'm going with this. But I've found so many classic tunes, and to me the chords are so wrong. And I just saw a thing with Branford Marsalis talking about doing a session when he was like right out of college, like 22, 23, with the great Art Blakey of the Jazz Messengers, drummer, who played, I think was the best drummer with Thelonious Monk. But he was playing with him, and Art Blakey just stopped him, and they were doing a Gershwin tune. And he said, Gershwin doesn't need you to make his music hip. It's already hip. Just play his chords. And then said he walked out, and then he turned back around and came back in and said, and I know the reason you're not is because you don't know them. And he's like, learn it right, and Branford Marsalis talked about being like really taken aback and like a young person offended, and then said 10 years later he thought that was the best thing anybody has ever said to him, and really useful information. Okay, here we go. Cool. And Spencer has a cool comment there. Well, I think this is our normal break time, so we'll take a little break here, and let's take 5 minutes. I have 40 after, and we'll come back at 45 after. All right. If I can figure out how to stop this.